A billionaire's diamond-studded watch gleamed as his hand struck the soldier's face. The slap echoed across the sacred plaza. But the real explosion was the truth it unleashed, a truth that would unravel an empire and redefine power itself. The air on this crisp October morning at Arlington National Cemetery was so clear it felt sharp, a blade of autumn chill against the lungs. Sunlight, thin and pale, filtered through the high clouds, setting the fiery maples and golden oaks ablaze with color. The rolling hills were a silent ocean of white headstones, each a stark, elegant monument to a life given in service. They stood in perfect, unending rows, sentinels guarding stories of sacrifice that stretched back through generations. At the very heart of this hallowed ground lay the tomb of the unknown soldier. Carved from a single block of pristine white marble, it seemed to radiate a quiet, unshakable dignity. A crowd had gathered at a respectful distance, their voices hushed to whispers, their footsteps soft on the stone plaza. Families, veterans, and tourists all stood together, bound by a shared sense of reverence. Amidst them all, Tomb Sentinel Ethan Hayes moved with a precision that was both mechanical and profoundly graceful. 30 years old, with sand-colored hair cropped close to his scalp and eyes the color of steel blue, he was the living embodiment of discipline. His 6'2" frame was encased in a flawless navy blue uniform, every crease a razor's edge, every brass button gleaming. The Tomb Guard Identification Badge, the second least awarded badge in the U.S. Army, was pinned proudly to his chest. 21 steps, a pause of 21 seconds, a sharp 90-degree turn. The crisp click-clack of his polished leather boots echoed in the stillness, a solitary rhythm in a world of silence. He shifted his M14 rifle from one shoulder to the other in a single, fluid motion, a movement practiced to the point of absolute perfection. His face was an unreadable mask, his gaze fixed on some unseen point in the distance. It was a mask forged not only in the relentless training at Fort Myer, but in the dust and fire of Afghanistan, where he'd earned a Navy Cross for pulling his platoon through a devastating mountain ambush. The scars he carried, both on his skin and in his soul, were hidden beneath the uniform, born with the same quiet resolve as his rifle. An elderly man, his back still straight despite his years, stood with his young granddaughter. A Korean War pin was affixed to the lapel of his tweed coat. Arthur Pendleton, 88 years old, had seen the face of duty in the frozen trenches of Chosin Reservoir. He leaned down to his granddaughter, Lily, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. "See that, Lilybug? He never falters. Not in the heat, not in the snow. He's here, so we never forget the ones who didn't get to come home." Lily, clutching a small American flag, watched Ethan with wide, curious eyes. "Does he ever get lonely, Grandpa?" Arthur's gaze softened. "I imagine he does, but his duty is stronger than his loneliness. That's what makes him a sentinel." Nearby, a young father knelt to speak to his son, Leo, who was fidgeting with the drawstring of his hoodie. "He walks exactly 21 steps, Leo," the father explained softly. "It represents the 21-gun salute, the highest honor a soldier can receive." The boy's restlessness stilled, his eyes locking onto Ethan's measured pace, a flicker of understanding dawning on his young face. The air was thick with this unspoken respect, a fragile, sacred bubble of peace. The bubble burst with the low, arrogant growl of a high-performance engine. A gleaming black Cadillac Escalade, its chrome grille flashing in the morning sun, pulled to a stop at the edge of the plaza. Its presence was a jarring note in the cemetery's solemn symphony, a declaration of wealth and impatience in a place defined by timeless sacrifice. Before the uniformed driver could even scramble to open the door, it swung outward. Julian Croft emerged, radiating an aura of restless energy. At 55, he was the titan behind Oratech Dynamics, a man whose innovations in artificial intelligence were reshaping the world. He was dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than the Escalade, and a Patek Philippe Nautilus watch with a deep blue face glinted on his wrist. His silver hair was swept back perfectly, but his sharp, calculating eyes scanned the hallowed grounds with an expression bordering on disdain. "Evelyn, are you sure this is the spot they recommended for the summit's opening gala?" he snapped, not at the driver, but at the woman hurrying to keep up with him. Evelyn Reed, his executive assistant, was a picture of corporate efficiency in a tailored navy blazer, her tablet clutched like a shield. "Yes, sir. The Arlington Memorial Amphitheater. They said the acoustics are remarkable and the historical significance is unparalleled." Croft scoffed, a harsh, grating sound that made several tourists turn their heads. "Unparalleled? It's a graveyard, a dusty monument to the past. My company is building the future. Quantum computing, global logistics, AI, that's real power. This," he waved a dismissive hand at the pristine rows of headstones, "is a tourist trap." His voice, loud and sharp, sliced through the reverent quiet. A woman in a red coat pulled her husband closer, whispering, "Can you believe the nerve?" Arthur Pendleton's jaw tightened, his hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. He had seen men like Croft before, men who confused net worth with self-worth. Oblivious to the ripples of disapproval spreading through the crowd, Croft strode toward the tomb, his expensive Italian shoes clicking aggressively on the stone. Evelyn followed, her expression strained. "Sir, perhaps we should lower our voices. This is sacred ground." "Sacred?" Croft's laugh was short and humorless. "Evelyn, everything has a price. Land, buildings, even history. The only thing that's sacred is progress. And this place is the definition of stagnation." He stopped just short of the velvet rope that cordoned off the ceremonial plaza, his eyes narrowing as he watched Ethan's unwavering patrol. The contrast between the two men was stark. One, a whirlwind of restless ambition. The other, a pillar of immovable duty. The stage was set for a collision of two worlds that could never coexist. "Look at this guy," Croft said, his voice loud enough to carry across the plaza, a deliberate performance for the captive audience. "A life-size tin soldier. What's the point? We could automate this with a drone and a holographic guard for a fraction of the cost. More precise, too." Evelyn shifted uncomfortably, her fingers tightening on her tablet. "Sir, the tomb guards are members of the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment. It's considered one of the most prestigious assignments in the military." "Prestigious?" Croft interrupted, his tone dripping with mockery. "For what? Marching in circles? My junior engineers write code that influences global markets before they've had their morning coffee. This guy's playing dress-up for tourists." He raised his phone, the sleek black rectangle looking alien in this setting, and snapped a quick photo of Ethan. "I'll use this in my keynote next week. The perfect slide for my tradition versus innovation segment. Guess which one ends up in the dustbin of history every single time." Arthur Pendleton's face was now a thundercloud. He drew Lily closer, whispering, "Some people have no concept of honor, sweetheart. They think because they can buy anything, they own everything." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, a blend of discomfort and rising anger. Leo, the young boy, tugged on his father's coat. "Dad, why is that man so mean?" "Because he's weak, son," the father replied, his eyes fixed on Croft. "He's trying to prove he's strong by tearing something beautiful down." Sensing he was losing the crowd's admiration and gaining their scorn, Croft decided to double down, a gambler's instinct he'd honed in hostile takeovers. He leaned forward, his voice rising, projecting across the plaza directly at Ethan. "Hey, soldier boy, I've got a proposition for you." Ethan's pace didn't change. His focus remained absolute. But for those watching closely, a new tension appeared in the set of his jaw, a coiled stillness beneath the perfect uniform. He'd faced down insurgents in narrow alleyways who had screamed far worse things. His training was to channel it all, the fear, the anger, into the precise execution of his duty. Croft's smile became a sneer. He was not used to being ignored. "I'll make a $1 million donation to any veteran charity you choose. Right now, all you have to do is stop your little parade and say, 'Good morning, Mr. Croft.'" A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The offer was so crass, so transactional, it felt like a desecration. Evelyn's professional mask finally cracked. "Sir, please, that's incredibly inappropriate. We should go." "Not now, Evelyn." Croft snapped, his eyes locked on the silent, marching sentinel. "I'm making a point. Everything and everyone has a price tag. What's yours, soldier? 2 million? 5? Name it." Ethan's silence was a wall. It was not passive. It was an active, unyielding force. A quiet, powerful statement that in this place, Julian Croft's money was a foreign currency with no value. For a man like Croft, who defined his existence by his ability to influence and control, this silent rebuke was more infuriating than any shouted insult. His face flushed a deep, mottled red. The sneer collapsed into a mask of pure rage. "You think you're better than me?" he hissed, the words tearing through the tense air. "You're a public servant. I'm a titan of industry. You work for me." And then he did it. With a gesture of supreme arrogance, he unhooked the velvet rope from its brass stanchion, letting it fall to the ground. He took one deliberate step, then another, his polished Italian loafers scuffing the sacred stone of the plaza. He had crossed a line that was both physical and symbolic. The crowd fell utterly silent. The air crackled with disbelief. Evelyn let out a small, strangled gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Arthur Pendleton took an involuntary step forward, his old soldier's instincts screaming at the violation. In that moment, the impossible happened. Ethan Hayes stopped. He halted mid-stride, an unprecedented break in the immutable ritual. The rhythmic click-clack of his boots ceased, leaving a void of sound that was deafening. For a full second, he stood perfectly still. Then, with the same impossible precision that defined his march, he executed a turn. Not the ceremonial turn to face the tomb, but a sharp, direct pivot to face the intruder. He brought his rifle from his shoulder to the port arms position in a single, powerful motion. The maneuver was so swift, so authoritative, it was a statement in itself. He stood facing Julian Croft, his body a rigid line of defiance, his sunglasses reflecting the billionaire's twisted, furious face. When he spoke, his voice was not loud, but it carried across the plaza with the force of a thunderclap. It was calm, steady, and laden with an authority that had been forged in the crucible of command. "Sir," Ethan said, each word perfectly enunciated, "this is hallowed ground. You are to step back behind the ropes and show respect for the unknown soldier." It was not a request. It was an order. For a split second, Julian Croft was stunned into silence, his mouth agape. He had expected fear, or at least deference. He had not expected a command. His shock quickly curdled back into rage, his ego wounded beyond repair. "Respect?" he spat, his voice rising to a shrill shout. "You want respect? My taxes pay your salary. My company's technology protects this country. You don't tell me what to do." His hand shot out. The slap was shockingly fast. The sound, a sharp, ugly crack, echoed off the marble of the tomb, a gunshot of desecration. A vivid red handprint instantly bloomed on Ethan's pale cheek, stark against his disciplined composure. Gasps of horror erupted from the crowd. Lily buried her face in her grandfather's coat. Leo began to cry, his father sweeping him up into a protective embrace. Shouts of outrage followed. "Get him out of here!" a man yelled. "You can't do that!" screamed a woman. Ethan didn't move. He didn't even flinch. His jaw tightened, the muscle flexing, but his posture remained perfect, his rifle held steady. His steel blue eyes, now visible as he slightly tilted his head, locked onto Croft's with an unflinching calm that was more terrifying than any rage. It was the calm of a man who had faced down death and found it less offensive than this. Before Croft could utter another word, they appeared, two figures, moving with the swift, coordinated purpose of predators. They were not cemetery security guards. They were military police, their uniforms crisp, their faces impassive, and all business. One took Croft's right arm, the other his left, their grips like iron clamps. "Sir," the first MP said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion, "you're under arrest for assaulting a U.S. service member on federal property and desecrating a national shrine." Croft struggled, his face a mask of crimson disbelief. "Do you know who I am? I'm Julian Croft. I'll have your jobs. My lawyers will bury you. I'm having dinner with a senator tonight." His frantic protests were cut short as Arthur Pendleton stepped forward, his voice ringing with the authority of his generation. "That man you just struck," he said, pointing a trembling but steady finger at Ethan, "is Sergeant Ethan Hayes of the United States Marine Corps. He wears the Navy Cross for pulling 3 wounded men out from under enemy fire in the Karengal Valley. He stands at post not for a salary, but for the brothers he lost there." The information landed like a bombshell. A wave of awe and shame washed over the crowd. The man Croft had dismissed as a prop, a tin soldier, was a proven hero. The MPs began to lead Croft away, his struggles becoming more pathetic with each step. His shouts of "This isn't over. I own this city," sounded hollow and desperate, the ravings of a king whose crown had just been melted down before his eyes. Evelyn stood frozen, her tablet hanging uselessly by her side, watching the complete and utter unraveling of the most powerful man she had ever known. His empire of influence, built on billions of dollars and ruthless ambition, had just been dismantled by a single, silent sentinel who stood for something money could not buy. As the military police escorted Julian Croft to a waiting vehicle, his protests faded into the vast, solemn silence of the cemetery. The disruption was over. Evelyn Reed, her face pale, finally moved, her fingers fumbling as she dialed her phone, her voice shaky but firm as she began the impossible task of damage control. She glanced one last time at Ethan, a flicker of something she hadn't felt in years, admiration in her eyes. The crowd remained, hushed and still, watching the sentinel. The angry red mark was still visible on Ethan's cheek, a stark reminder of the violation. But his bearing was unbroken. He took a deep breath, his shoulders squared, and with a precision that defied the chaos of the last few minutes, he resumed his march. Click-clack. The sound of his boots on the stone was steady, rhythmic, and reassuring. It was the sound of resilience, the sound of duty enduring. Click-clack. 21 steps. He was no longer just a guard performing a ritual. He was a symbol. The parents in the crowd knelt by their children, explaining in hushed tones not just what had happened, but what it meant. Leo, the young boy, looked up at his father, his eyes wide with a new understanding. "Dad," he whispered, "is he a superhero?" His father, his voice thick with emotion, nodded. "Yeah, Leo, he is. Not because he fought back, but because he didn't have to. He just had to stand for something." As Ethan continued his solitary, perfect patrol, the golden leaves drifted down around him, a silent, respectful tribute. The tomb stood as it always had, a beacon of sacrifice, its marble glowing under the autumn sun. The phones in the crowd remained lowered, the urge to capture a moment replaced by a deeper need to simply witness it, to absorb its weight and meaning. In a world obsessed with wealth and influence, some things remain beyond price. Duty, honor, sacrifice. They are not assets to be traded or commodities to be bought. They are principles to be lived, and if necessary, defended. Sergeant Ethan Hayes stands as watch, not for fame or fortune, but for the silent ranks of the unknown, for the values they died to protect. What would you do if you witnessed such profound disrespect in a sacred place? Would you speak up, stand firm, or simply bear witness? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's honor those who serve. And as you do, please comment with respect. Never forget the cost of freedom.